Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Talking City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. It's the day after City have beaten Aston Villa in a crucial game in the battle for the Champions League places in the Premier League. I'm Tyrone Marshall, hosting today, joined by Simon Bajkowski, who I last saw, 10, 11 hours ago, leaving the Etihad.
Stay away from each other.
I know, Simon, I know. It's,
I have warned you, but
I know.
Just keep coming back.
Yeah, I know. You need to get that restraining order in place as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I think this is the first Talking City podcast since Thursday. So slack from us on a bank holiday. Some people took Easter Monday off, which is entirely unacceptable in this industry. They shall remain nameless, but it does mean we have two games to cover. Let's just cover Everton off in one question, shall we? I wasn't there at Goodison. You were saying farewell to the stadium that
the
needs
grand
to be
old lady,
the most atrocious press box in the Premier League. From a City point of view, it was grinding it out at Everton, but a big win in terms of setting it up for what came on Tuesday, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were. It was a similar game to the derby where they were just not very good, but they were stable, but they just weren't very good. And until about kind of the 70th minute, it was. Basically, unfortunately for him, it was after James Tarkowski did his hamstring. Michael Keane came on and Marmoush suddenly got a lot more change from Keane than he had from Tarkowski. City started finding their groove a bit, and man of the moment, Nico O'Reilly stepped up with the important goal. Kovacic comes off the bench to get another one. I think, it's 0-0 after 78 minutes and Pep brings Doku and Kovacic off the bench and a lot of people are like, oh, what is he doing? And to be honest, that is a common theme at the minute. The team came out for Aston Villa last night and everyone was like, what is he doing? It turns out he knows what he's doing, this manager who's won quite a lot. He would be the first to say and has said that he's not had the best season, but City seem to have hit on a winning formula that starts with them being stable, and sometimes when it doesn't pay off, it's really, really boring, like the United game. And the Everton game was pretty boring for 75 minutes. But City are more solid, and when their attack clicks, they win games.
Yeah, and Doku a great weapon to bring off the bench when he's the best player in the world over 5.
The best player in the world over 5 meters, said Pep.
Yeah, we were talking about on the way out last night. It feels like a backhanded compliment.
It's a lot to do with pace, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a lot to do with pace. He's fast, basically.
I feel
he touches the ball only once.
Yeah,
5 meters.
I feel like I'm the best journalist in the world over the first 5 words, and then it kind of goes downhill. But yeah, well, it was funny because he came on at Everton and he was quite good. And Pep was asked about him after the Everton game, and he said, "Oh, I've been so unfair on Jeremy, so unfair. It's nothing that he's done. It's just like I've gone without wingers. But he's been so good. But also today was loads better than when he played against United at Old Trafford, where he just wasn't very good. And it was like, right, so he can improve then." And as soon as he said, I've been so unfair on him, you think, well, he's not starting the next game, is he? And he didn't start against Aston Villa, but he came off the bench and made the difference. And absolutely. Nobody wants to be a substitute, but there is a lot to be said for bringing on a fresh Jeremy Doku against tiring legs.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when he's so good over 5 meters and those defenders are tired. And the Villa game, let's start at the end then, because it was the end that it kind of built to. And there was a couple of surprising things about the goal, I guess. A, the identity of the goal scorer and a good finish. And B, not only was Doku exceptional over those 5 meters, but the quality of the ball across goal, when I think we all know it's one of the most inconsistent parts of his game, that he is so good getting to the edge of the box and then so inconsistent. But the ball was De Bruyne-esque. It was crying out for a finish, and it got it. Outside
of the right boot, swirling across the 6-yard box. It was brilliant. And there were a number of players who were around it, trying to get on the end of it. And then no one kind of predicted that popping up beyond the back post, because it was a harder finish than he made it look.
Well, it went so far across goal, didn't it? It's one of those where if Haaland was playing, in a way, maybe either Haaland converts it or it doesn't happen because there's a defender in the 6-yard box. But up steps Matheus Nunes, who has had a lot of criticism
and was going to get a lot of criticism last night until he scored, but came up with his first Premier League goal for City. What a time to do it, and what a night, really, and what a performance and what a result. It wasn't perfect for 90 minutes, but I think that's the best City have been over 90 minutes for as long as I can remember this season. And I think that's the best result they've had. Maybe beating Newcastle 4-0, but in terms of the pressure, like I said to you at half time, didn't I? A draw didn't help either of them, really. And City would have been okay with a draw and you'd still fancy them, but a win just makes things so much more comfortable for them.
Yeah. How did Nunes' goal change your rating then? Take us.
Well, it went from a 5 to a 7, which I think is
tapping. Incredible.
Fair enough. I don't think he played very well, and he also contributed towards the Villa equaliser with a needless error where he sort of has the ball in Villa's half, turns around and just kind of boots it backwards. And instead of going to a City player, it goes to Marcus Rashford, who then runs, and Diaz can't stop him, and he ends up conceding a penalty running into Ramsey. But Nunes just...
Still, even as good as last night was, and as brilliant as a moment it was for him, it's still hard to envisage where his long-term future lies in this team, isn't it?
I get a stick for the stick that I give Nunes, which has made me think about the stick that I give Nunes a lot. And I think he's infuriating as a footballer, because I think there is so much kind of high-level stuff that he does well, but he just sort of wipes that out with really simple errors and really like daft things where, you know, he will do 90% of something well, but then the ball into the box is terrible, or the last decision is just not what you want. And I think that makes it more frustrating, because it's not that a player is like rubbish or just like not up to the level. Like, he has shown that he can be up to the level, but too often he falls below it. With kind of needless errors, and the more needless errors you make, you sort of think, is that just ingrained in your game and therefore not going to change, which City can't kind of live with, really, because you can't just keep giving opposition goals. But, you know, he has played a lot this season because he's been one of the only ones who's been fit, and he's played out of position, and he is a really kind of popular member of the squad, and they were all absolutely delighted for him last night.
Yeah, you still feel like City are probably going to look for a natural right back at some point, and, you know, given Pep's kind of what felt almost like an accidentally brutal takedown of him at Old Trafford when he said he doesn't have the intelligence to play in the middle, it raises questions over his future. We spoke to him in the mix zone last night, and at the end, one of our colleagues asked him if he'd been watching the Champions League quarterfinals and last 16, because a lot of it was about kind of reassessing targets this year and qualifying for it. And I mean, he kind of looked blank for a while. Then he almost had to be reminded, like, Arsenal, Real Madrid, those fixtures, and he was like, I don't watch football. So one of these players that goes home and doesn't watch football, more of a Netflix man by all accounts. But maybe that contributes to what Pep sees as that.
Yeah,
maybe he could.
City's Ben White.
Watch City's Ben White.
That's maybe it's a right back thing.
There. It could be a right back thing, and maybe that is his future now. And he certainly deserved that moment. But in terms of the two games this week, Nico O'Reilly been City's best player across the two?
Yeah, him or Guardiola. And like, no surprise that they're together. O'Reilly's still a bit raw defensively, as you might expect for a number 10 playing left back, but
becoming so influential though, isn't he?
Yeah, like Guardiola's there to cover whenever O'Reilly, you know, whenever the opposition gets past O'Reilly into the space where he kind of should be. But whenever City get the ball, it seems like O'Reilly is just there everywhere, and taking so much responsibility for a player who's so green in the team. I just kind of, I don't know, I think there's a tendency to overhype academy players and to be sort of more, to overlook their, you know, deficiencies. Maybe I'm kinder to O'Reilly than I am to Nunes, judging them when they're both playing out of position, perhaps. But like, at the same time, you just kind of watch O'Reilly and you think, what a player. Like, so good. I think it's 5 starts in a row. He's just utterly unfazed by everything, and his intelligence to be in the right place all the time is kind of ridiculously good for anyone, never mind someone in his position.
Yeah. I mean, it's always kind of felt, if you go back to school games, it's the last position to be picked. It's a position no one wants to play, left back. And in a way, I mean, maybe there's similarities with Lewis Skelly at Arsenal there, and it's probably a position you can kind of hide in a way. You can go under the radar or just kind of get through it. The fact that he's come into the team and has, he sees so much of the ball. You think back to the Bournemouth game we were at where he turned the game on its head, really, and he's become so influential. There was a moment last night where McAtee came off at 1-1 with about 16 minutes to go, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Pep had O'Reilly kind of by the back of the neck, giving him all these detailed instructions. And I think part of that was that he was the one seeing so much of the ball at that point. And, in a position, like I say, for a young player, it's probably a position where you could kind of think, I'll just tiptoe my way into the team here. And he's done the total opposite, hasn't he? Even from a difficult position, he's been determined to try and influence games.
Yeah, and, Pep has changed left-back, really, if we think of how the position is seen. By refusing to sign a natural left-back and playing Alex Zinchenko and Fabian Delph there and Nathan Ake and Josko Guardiola. And those have been different iterations. You had kind of a more creative player inverting and coming inside. And then you had kind of Nathan Ake, the more defensive position, like can get forward but tends to stay back. And then last season it was Guardiola going everywhere, kind of more places than Guardiola wanted him to go, really, but all over the pitch. And now O'Reilly, who's kind of had this academy schooling in, number 10, really, midfield, and he's trained with the first team all season, and he's been tried in different positions. It's not just left back. But they've found something at left back that Pep saw, and no one else really saw it. And it was seen as a bit mad, and yet here we are, and it looks like genius now. And yeah, I don't think O'Reilly's long-term position is left back, but what is a left back anymore? And if you can have someone who starts there, but then is involved up the pitch in every single move, then it's just fantastic, whatever position you call it.
Yeah, it was probably more similarities with Lewis Skelly, that they're both midfielders.
Yeah,
who came through the academy and play left back, but often find themselves in the centre of the pitch. But the interesting thing with O'Reilly is that even when he is wide, he's really influencing games. You think of the cross he put in for Haaland at Bournemouth.
Yeah, the cross from McAtee.
It comes naturally to him when he moves in field.
Yeah,
but he can hold his width as well and contribute that way.
Yeah, and that's the sort of where City always inverted, and then the wide players sort of started going out, and that's O'Reilly is keeping Doku out the team, really, and Grealish, because Pep's decided that the best way to go forward is to pack his midfield and to have O'Reilly and Núñez providing the width. Yeah. And often O'Reilly will come inside, and he's great at ghosting into the box and getting on the end of crosses, as he did at Everton, where he's got no right to be on the right-hand side of the box at the near post when Núñez puts the ball in, but he's there, and he makes the difference. But he's been given so much responsibility in the team, and he's taken it all on.
Yeah, and another thing he's enabled City to do is play Guardiola at centre-back. I think he's played centre-back every game since he told you guys before the derby that he wanted to play centre-back. So shows the influence of the Manchester Evening News. Any City players listening, any gripes you want to get off your chest, we're always available, and it shows that Pep clearly reads us and pays attention. So worth bearing in mind. But he has been excellent at centre-back, hasn't he? And we were saying last night, that partnership with Diaz looks so well balanced, doesn't it? A left footer and a right footer. Diaz can be a ball player. The crossfield ball he played for the goal was really good, but Guardiola's better at that. But not only to have the left foot, right foot balance, it allows Diaz to be that real aggressor, Guardiola to kind of sit back. It just feels like a really nice partnership, doesn't it?
Yeah, and Guardiola is a ball player, and he's so stylish, but I think he feels a bit out of place at left back because he's so big. He is he's a huge unit. Yeah. And speaking of huge units, Morgan Rogers destroyed City in the reverse fixture, and was deployed up against Guardiola last night, and Guardiola basically won every duel. It was one of those things where, like, every duel they had, both teams wanted a foul because they were so aggressive with each other.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like, maybe Diaz could have done the same, but you need a really, really top class centre back to be able to handle that. And Guardiola did it perfectly. And Rodgers barely got Rodgers was sort of reduced to running back to his own half to try and get on the ball, because every time, Martinez kept playing the ball up to him, trying to get him in the game. And every time Guardiola just said, nope, we're having it instead. It was another centre-back masterclass from him.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the aggression in the game. It was an antsy, edgy, angry sort of game, wasn't it? I mean, I guess, like I say, City played really well. They were troubled early on, I guess, by Marcus Rashford. And the penalty seemed to set the tone for a lot of what followed. It's a strange one in that obviously Guardiola and the players didn't think it was a penalty. A lot of supporters didn't think it was a penalty. Everyone in the press box seemed to think it was a penalty. I thought and still think it was a penalty.
Yeah, I think it's a penalty. I think when it happened, I said to you, it depends on, because it looked like he kind of went looking for it.
Yeah.
So it depends whether the referee thinks he's kind of initiated contact rather than had contact. And I think that was the gripe of City. I think Pep said that Ruben Diaz had kind of moved backwards so that he
Pep doing that motion of like stepping away a lot on the top,
so that he didn't collide with Ramsey, and Ramsey collided with him anyway. But I sort of see it as one of those almost, when like the attacker is racing with the goalkeeper for the ball, the attacker gets the ball and is then wiped out. It kind of, if you're the team with the goalkeeper, you say, oh, well, he's knocked that out of play. It's not like, but it doesn't matter. The attacker's got there first, and that is what matters. And, Ramsey was running at such speed that any kind of touch is going to knock him out, even if Diaz was trying to move out of the way, even if he's got a toe on the ball. It was just one of those. And it's harsh to call it clumsy because it was at such high speed.
Very fast, wasn't it?
But it's a coming together, and the attacker's been blocked off. So I didn't think you could have any arguments about the penalty, and yet City spent most of the rest of the first half moaning about the penalty. Pep was booked for it, and Bernardo Silva was, but it then changed the game because the crowd were singing "You're not fit to referee" and suddenly up for it, and City were demanding action at every kind of opportunity. Luca Digne got booked for a challenge that he maybe otherwise wouldn't have been booked for, just because City was so angry. And then there's a bit where McAtee kind of cleared a corner towards the end of the first half, and he just, again, he clears it, and then Digne comes into him, and there was nothing to it, but City are all over saying like, come on, where's this red card? And it's like, it fired them up, I suppose.
Yeah, it kind of set the tone for it, didn't it? I can't remember which Villa player it was now, but one went down when there was no real contact, looking for a booking. We saw, Bernardo got studs in the chest, which looked painful, but was holding his face.
Yeah.
Diaz and Watkins.
Well, we heard Bernardo.
Yeah.
He was like, he made sure to shout like louder than he's ever shouted before.
Yeah. Instead, Diaz and Watkins later on, Watkins gets booked.
Yeah.
When like Diaz gets clipped from the back of the head and goes down holding the front of his face. And it's the kind of thing that happens when you've been angered into a game by the officials, and it did kind of set the tone for that.
Yeah.
That edginess. But it was a huge win, and it's 3 huge wins in a row now for City. And I mean, they have been living on the edge, haven't they? 2-0 down to Palace, and I know it's comfortable in the scoreline.
Yeah.
2-0 down to Palace, you're thinking this is not looking good.
Yeah.
0-0 with Everton for so long.
Yeah.
1-1 with Villa into the 94th minute.
Yeah.
It feels now like it's job done. And this 3 games and the way they've kind of kept going and pulled it out of the fire, when maybe 3 months ago, they wouldn't have won all 3. Maybe they'd have won none of them.
Yeah.
It feels like a huge run, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because Pep brought up the Bournemouth game again last night, the FA Cup game, where they weren't good in the first half. But at the same time, Haaland missed a few chances, didn't he, that could have gone in. But he mentioned that as a moment where they realised they weren't miles away from what they could be this season. And I think they've really taken that on board, because they're not blowing anyone away, but they've got enough when they suffer a setback now to come back from it and say, actually, we're still going to play our game. And like, I remember at Villa Park in the reverse fixture, City got done so easily when like Martinez just kicked the ball up the pitch to Tielemans. Tielemans set Rodgers free and it was like game over. Martinez spent so much time on the ball last night trying to bait City into pressing him so that he could release it. And the pressing was so much better. And it was just a case of City saying, we're confident in our game. We're confident we are all going to be in the right positions. You do what you want because we're going to play our game and we're going to be fine with that. And, you know, it was heading for a 1-1 draw, which would have been okay, but not, you know, disastrous. But then City get the win and it feels like that was a really good night for City.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, these 3 games probably show where they are. That City at their very best of the last few years would have won all 3 comfortably, probably without the scare. At their worst, back in December, November, they probably won none of them.
Yeah.
And the fact that they've won 3, but have had their moments in all 3 where it's been difficult, probably shows that they've recovered, but they're still not there.
Yeah. Rashford hit the post inside 20 seconds, didn't he? And it was like, oh my word. Yeah. That's it. Like, they've not been as good as Liverpool or Arsenal, but like they're third after the Villa win. And I know there's games in hand, but like for your season where everything goes wrong, if you can end up finishing third, that is not a bad kind of massive drop off to have.
Yeah, reason for next season.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. They think they're not absolutely miles off, and they won't be. You know, I don't think they'll finish too many points behind Arsenal. And this is after, you know, such a terrible season for, and it is a terrible season. No one's hiding that fact, but it's the end results may not make it look like it was a terrible season. And they've got the momentum now going into easier games.
Yeah. I mentioned Núñez stopped in the mix zone last night. There was some mix zone drama on Saturday as well. Joe did it for us, who's not here, unfortunately, but we're both well aware of what happened. And you always know the mix zone's going to be good when a player comes out without a press officer and doesn't even ask to be stopped, just walks to the journalist. You're like, this will be good.
I think we can count it on like a handful of...
Yeah, well, I think Salah did it at Southampton, didn't he?
Salah did it at Southampton, did it, yeah.
There's more out than in stuff.
City, I only really remember Aguero did it in Pep's first season, when Jesus had pushed him out the team, basically, and Aguero never came through the mix, so never mind stopped, and suddenly he's there, not playing, but wanting to speak, and you're like, oh my, something is happening. Yeah. But yeah, Kevin De Bruyne came over to the few journalists that were there, wanting to speak, and he's had a few kind of broadcast interviews, but nothing really sustained. And this was 8 minutes of questions, basically about his future and the way that his exit at City has been handled.
Yeah, and he's not very happy about it.
He's not very happy. No, and it's sad, and I think it will be like. I think his ending will be as unhappy as Aguero's was when Aguero went out thinking, I can still play for this team. I don't know why you're getting rid of me, in 2021. De Bruyne still thinks he can perform at the highest level. And, the other thing about the Everton mix zone was that he was saying this about 2 meters away from Cheeky Bagirison and Hugo Viana, who had made the decision to move him on. And, he was even asked, like, is he not awkward talking about this with them there? And he was like, no. He was Kevin De Bruyne.
So it's worth saying as well that the mix zone at Everton and the corridors at Goodison are so tight that there's no way they wouldn't have heard what was going on.
No, and De Bruyne is often blunt. He's very blunt to the point. I think the first question was like, it must have been great to get the reception from Everton fans who all applauded you as you came off. And he was like, I don't care. I just want to play football. It was like, oh, right, here we go. It's very difficult to feel sympathy for footballers because they're paid so much. And I'm not sure, I don't think it would have been worth City paying Kevin De Bruyne the same money to stay on next season, because I think his performances against Everton and Villa show that he can't quite do it as he did. But he spoke quite interestingly about kind of getting the news at the start of the week, which he wasn't expecting. It was a shock to be told, no, we don't want you anymore, without kind of any offers going back and forth. And then his whole family were away. His family were away. So he's in this kind of like big empty house on his own, which has been his home for the last 10 years. And he's just been told, well, it won't be your home soon, mate, because you're off, whether you want to or not. And he spoke of how tough it had been to process that. And again, poor Kevin De Bruyne with all his money and all his talent, but like it must have been difficult for him.
Isn't it?
You can see, I think that helps to explain why he hasn't hid how much he's been hurting, because it has been quite a hurtful situation for him, which is really sad because he's, City's greatest ever player or one of them. But as he said, it is a business decision, and sometimes there isn't any room for sentiment in business.
Yeah, it's interesting that he seems to be hinting that he thinks he's paying the price for the fact that, like I said, the age profile of this team's been a big thing this year, the way they've kind of fallen off a cliff at times. And he seems to think he's kind of paying the price for that.
I can see that point as well, because you sort of think, well, last year he missed most of the year and then he came back. He had a brilliant game at Newcastle where he kind of won the game for them. He didn't really have another... He wasn't able to play consistently well in the second half of last season and wasn't able to lift the team as he would have liked. I don't think his level this season has been... Well, in fact, at the start of this season, he was better than he had been last season, but then he's out for 3 months and he can't get it back again. So maybe if he was playing in a team that was on the way to the title again, they would be like, yeah, he can still do it. But I think the money is key as well, because he's one of the highest earners. And if you get rid of him, like everyone talks about transfer fee, but wages are the bigger, the bigger metric for football clubs, really. Whoever has the highest wage bill tends to win the league, and wages are the biggest kind of outgoing expense. If City can get rid of De Bruyne, well, as City get rid of De Bruyne on his wages, they can probably sign 2 players for reasonable sums, maybe 120, 130 million between them, and still have change from the wages that they've been paying De Bruyne. So you get rid of Kyle Walker as well, the wage bill undoubtedly comes down, and it's been creeping up. So
I mean, those two are probably £30 million a year in wages and bonuses.
Yeah. You're talking like 400 a week, 350 a week, which
it's £40 million a year.
Which
huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a big saving, and it means that can be reinvested in the future of the team and the rebuild of the team, which, De Bruyne feels he has more to give, and also kind of hasn't ruled out staying in the Premier League. I was
just going to say, does he prove his point by staying in the Premier League?
Well, I don't know who takes him on anywhere near those wages. That's the thing.
Chelsea. Probably maybe. Feel like they're suddenly looking for kind of experienced heads. I guess they're a possibility. Or he has to go to a Newcastle or a Villa or something like that, maybe.
I don't know. Do you take Morgan Rogers out the Villa team to play? And it feels like blasphemous to say because De Bruyne has done so much, but I'm just not sure. He's not shown the consistency over 2 years. No. So if you're looking at his performances, who is saying, yeah, he is worth making our highest paid player? And, Chelsea might be mad enough to do it, but
Chelsea, I think, would probably be the only ones.
If you De Bruyne, just say, right, I'll go and play alongside their 15 attackers that they've got. And, I'm not, and, whichever, there's a lot made of like, oh, well, Maresca's at Chelsea. You're like, oh, right, yeah. De Bruyne knows him
probably
well, does he, from like one season where he was Pep's assistant, and De Bruyne was, out for some of that as well. So I can't see that he stays in England. Maybe Europe. I know he's kind of, well, he's open to anything, basically.
For Europe or Premier League, he's going to have to take a sizable pay cut, isn't he?
I think so, yeah. But also, if you're not joining one of the top teams in England, do you want to be, do you want to see him at West Ham or like, I don't know, Bournemouth or Brentford, something like that? Like, I'm not sure. I just can't see it. No. I can't see it. I think he'll go abroad.
Yeah. Once he's calmed down, probably that's probably the wisest move. But he is angry at the moment, and he'll be very angry if he doesn't start on Sunday. So will he start on Sunday?
I don't know. I think
call, isn't it?
I think what is in his favour is that Pep has settled on this team where the middle is packed, and I think it was De Bruyne and McAtee against Villa and Palace, who are sort of back to be the central figures behind Marmoush, and then you've got the fullbacks providing the width. So I think that goes in his favour. It's just whether, someone like Foden or even Grealish comes in. But yeah, Pep seems to be doing this thing where he said it after Everton that he, wants him to take in the applause when he's substituted every game. So Pep seems to be wanting him to. I don't think he'll play many 90 minutes before the end of the season.
Farewell tour.
He played about 90. Well, he played 95 against Villa, but he still got subbed off. So he will kind of be taken off so that he can take in the applause. But it's a tough one against Forest.
Yeah. And what do City need to change from the City ground where they lost 1-0? Or have they, by finding this stability, have they already changed? Do you think it's going to be a very different game?
I think they've changed. Guardiola was really grumpy after the Forest defeat because he was like, that is not my team. That is not what they are up for. And he, in his answers after the game, he kind of put it down to commitment and was like, these players have to realise that they have to get the top 4, top 5. Like, it felt like all of them were kind of sleepwalking towards the end of the season thinking, this rebuild's coming, we'll get Champions League. And it was like, well, not if you keep getting beat, you won't. Since the March international break, when they've come back at Bournemouth, the players have noticed a change in themselves and in kind of training where there is this new commitment, there is this new focus. And I think that was evident against Villa where the press was so disciplined against what Villa were trying to do. So I think they will be much better. But Forest are also, remain a very good team.
Yeah, absolutely. And just lastly, Nunes said last night that winning the FA Cup and qualifying for the Champions League still wouldn't be a good season. I think from where City were at the start of the season, you'd have to accept that. But there's still the chance here to win a domestic trophy and a proper domestic trophy, not the Community Shield where, all right, you're getting through last year's achievements.
I thought you were going to say Carabao Cup then.
Well, yeah. One of the 3 either league or knockout competitions in England to be 9 years in a row of winning one. And that is beyond just winning the FA Cup. That's something worth fighting for because that is incredible consistency. And to achieve that in what everyone believes has been your worst season, and probably has been your worst season for 9 years, it would be remarkable, wouldn't it?
I think that's it. I think there's a lot of pride at City at what they've achieved, and there's been a lot of wounded pride at City this year at what they've the criticism that's gone at them, and the criticism that has been levelled at them is not just been like, you're playing bad, it's like, your reign is over. You're done. Yeah. And I think for them to be able to say, our bad season is finishing 3rd and winning the FA Cup would be the best kind of comeback they could give to that. Pep's started to say other teams with our season would finish 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th a lot. Which, you can work out for yourselves which teams have occupied those positions. But there's enough punch in them at the minute for them to be able to start saying, hang on a minute, like, we're definitely not finished. Yeah. And we're still capable of winning the big trophies, of which the FA Cup is still one.
Absolutely, and they can take a big step towards that by beating Forest on Sunday. Si will be there with Joe. We'll have you covered from Wembley, of course, as we always do on Sunday. City's 7th successive FA Cup semi-final as well, which is an incredible record. But that's all for today's Talking City podcast. We'll be back early next week to dissect what has happened at Wembley and hopefully look forward to an FA Cup final. But for now, thanks for listening. Please remember to leave a review, like and subscribe, and we'll speak to you all on Monday.